Melbourne. Is it night time or morning there? Lara Spirit's here. You can answer those sorts of questions.
I actually can't, I'm afraid.
You'll do most things, but not time zones.
I have a limited mandate on the questions I can respond to.
Yeah, you're not providing a running commentary on the time. Right, Lara Spirit, Times Red Box reporter, is here. We have got Deputy PMQs Unpacked coming in a moment. It's Oliver Dowden and Angela Rayner again. Where's Rishi Sunak hiding this week?
He is at the NATO summit, which is a slightly more explicable excuse than the NHS's birthday, I think, for missing Prime Minister's questions today. So his second consecutive absence.
The cameras are on.
Stunning.
Good. What do you think might come up? It was a bit rubbish last week.
It was a bit boring
We had to hide it by playing tennis noises last week.
But the best of the rest was quite good last week, no?
The best of the rest was good.
Thank you very
yes,
much.
you're quite right. Yeah,
Thank
Lara's good at doing that bit. What do you think? Do you think she might fire things up a bit more today?
I think hopefully. I mean, it's interesting because what she majored on last week was largely house building, home ownership, the Tory mortgage bombshell and penalty, etc. that they've been going on recently. Actually, the news this morning that we saw on the Bank of England, the fact that 4.5 million people have already seen their mortgage payments rise, that around 250,000 people could be looking at £1,000 extra a month as a result of interest rate rises. I think that would have meant that actually perhaps this week was a better week to go on that. But I would be really surprised if there wasn't something along the lines of that coming up today. I would imagine, would you not, that would be what they would
I think that would seem quite likely. And what was the anagram from last week? Can anyone on the YouTube channel remember? There was an anagram of Oliver Dowden. Somebody came up with a really good... Oh, what was it? Are you on the YouTube? Wooden drivel. No, it works. It's a proper anagram of Oliver Dowden. Wooden drivel.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Is there anyone who can come up with an anagram of Angela Rayner? That'll help past the next half an hour. And you're going to be back with Best of the West.
I will be.
Have you looked at the order paper yet? Do you know who's up?
Oh, I don't, but I mean, we'll see.
Lara Spirit will be here. Tim Shipman's here as well. How are you, Tim?
Well, I raced in because I was going to say wooden drivel loudly, but you beat me to it.
As you often do. Tim and I are for lunch later.
Really?
Yeah.
Where are you eating?
The famous lunch.
He's settling his debts.
Anywhere nice?
Hawksmoor.
Very nice then.
Very much so. He bet me a lunch, and he's finally settling it up. But don't worry, you're not going to be sad because we're going to turn everything's content here, so we're going to turn it into an item on the show. Claude in Westminster says PMQs has become irrelevant. That's the spirit.
Great.
There are no great orators, no theatrical players, and Rishi Sunak has no time for this session until the Speaker forces the government to answer the questions that continue to be boring and rubbish. Stay tuned for half an hour of boring rubbish, which is irrelevant. Deputy PMQs Unpacked live on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel. That's next. Don't go to it.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. In a moment, Deputy PMQs Unpacked. But first, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. The BBC presenter at the heart of allegations involving 4 separate young people has been urged to reveal themselves by fellow presenters. Jeremy Vine has said his survival instinct has kicked in, but look at the damage to his friends. NATO has unveiled a 3-part package to bring Ukraine closer to NATO. Volodymyr Zelensky says it's understandable that Ukraine can't join during the war, but an invitation would have been ideal. By the end of 2026, nearly 1 million households will be paying £500 more per month on their mortgage. Overall, the Bank of England says the economy is dealing well with rising interest rates, though. Teachers in England have voted in favour of industrial action in a dispute over pay. 88.5% voted to support strike action, but only just over half of those eligible in the NAS UWT actually voted. And the water regulator, Ofwat, says Thames Water's customers will not pay a penny more due to its recent poor performance and debt issues. Executives in the UK's largest water supplier and the water regulator have faced scrutiny from MPs on the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee this morning. We'll have a full news and sport roundup at 12:30, but now live on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for Deputy
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
Yes, it's that time of the week where we ask Tim Shipman, where's Rishi Sunak?
Rishi Sunak is hiding at the NATO summit this week. It does feel like we've done more of these deputies recently than the man himself.
The good thing is, though, Tim, they're so fun.
They are often fun.
Absolutely jam-packed with content.
And comedic flourishes.
Yeah, so we've got, if we're going to a school, we're off to now, because we thought deputies, it's Deputy Oliver Dowden, Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner is Deputy Leader, so we thought we'd go off to a school to speak to Deputy Head Teacher at Southmoor Academy, Sammy Wright. Hi, Sammy.
Hi there.
How are you? Paint a picture for us of your school this morning, this afternoon.
It's slight, very positive chaos. We have the whole of the National Youth Orchestra wandering around playing instruments. I've already done an interview this morning, and we have year 10s and 9s doing lots of transition events before we finish for the summer tomorrow.
Oh, so it's your last day. So you basically just wheeling in a big telly so you can put Jurassic Park 2 on?
Almost the opposite. We seem to have crammed all the exciting things into the last week. Yeah. So, it's been really positive. It's been really good for the kids. And it's lovely just to see energy going right up to the end.
Very good, very good. Presumably because you're often doing your teaching, you don't get to see PMQs very often?
No, I don't. I do sometimes try and find out what happened the day after, but it seems strangely difficult to pin it down.
Well, we're going to try and do that between us. And Sammy, you were also on we've spoken before, because particularly during COVID all of that, but you were on the Social Mobility Commission for some time.
Yes, that's right.
So it'll be interesting to see, because one of the main recurring themes of Oliver Dowden versus Angela Rayner, Tim, is I'm humble working class.
Who has been more mobile from their impoverished beginnings than the other.
Yeah, I'll take no lectures on social mobility.
From this working class lad.
Yeah.
Yes. I think Angela convinces more on this front.
I mean, he did go to a state school, which does mark him out in the cabinet. But, I think it's quite a stretch to claim
he's in that, minority of 93% of the population.
Well, exactly. He's basically a normal person.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you could argue that Angela Rayner
I think on that basis, though, we're both normal people, so you've got to question it somehow, haven't you?
Yeah, that's true. Are you a normal person, Sammy?
I hope so, but I was thinking that, one of the things in the Social Mobility Commissions, they always talk about the difference between relative poverty and absolute poverty. And you might say that Oliver Dowden exhibits relative normalness within the Tory party.
That's a very good point. Right then, so we're about to go to House of Commons High. Are we calling it that? School? Something like that. Have we got the music? Let's hit the music. There we are. Let's see who are going to be the naughty boys and girls and who are going to be well behaved.
It's very much an our generation drop, that, isn't it, in terms of the music?
Yeah, because
anybody under the age of 40 who knows what
who's listening,
who knows what Grange Hill was.
Aren't they bringing it back?
Oh, are they? Oh, well.
I think there was talk they were going to bring it back or make a film or something. This is the early theme as well, isn't it? This is the one with the sausage. The sausage on the fork in the opening credits.
I remember.
Sammy, do you think any of your children would know what Grange Hill was?
No, one of the depressing things about teaching is you realise that it's very, very quick, the process of the past becoming the distant past. And my kids, they barely remember COVID.
Well, there's probably no harm in that.
That's probably the long COVID, isn't it?
Are we ready to go to the House of Commons? Here we go then. This is quieten down, class, please. Let's go live to the House of Commons. Now it's question number 1 from Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know you're a keen historian, so I looked up the last time a Prime Minister missed 2 sessions in a row with other engagements, which was March 1996. And I'm very proud to be filling the boots of Lord John Prescott, but I think it's safe to say he's no Heseltine, Mr. Speaker. Why is it, John Prescott asked, that in Tory Britain, tens of thousands of families are facing repossession, negative equity and homelessness? And can he tell us, 27 years later, why I'm having to ask the same question?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, clearly the Right Honourable Lady did not listen to my previous comments. The Prime Minister is at NATO. Of course, that wouldn't be a problem if she'd had her way. Her old boss wanted to abandon Ukraine, abolish the army, and withdraw from NATO, and he certainly wouldn't be going to any summit, Mr. Speaker.
That's Jeremy Corbyn he's talking about.
When it comes to house building, I will take no lectures from the party opposite on home ownership. My parents would not have been able to buy their own home if it were not for Margaret Thatcher and the reforms introduced by her government, and this government is building on those with record house building.
Well, there we are.
That was quite a
quite
lot
lively,
going on there. Yes,
your first initial thoughts on that, Sammy?
Well, I'm impressed that you managed to predict the no lectures. That's a very anti-educationalist position. We should have more lectures.
Very good. So, he has said, I'm not going to take any lectures on July the 5th, on June the 7th, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4 times June the 7th. He also did it on May the 17th, twice, and on May the 11th.
I think in the realms of what might be described as a verbal tick.
Yes,
with probably one that earns a ping next time.
I think we might be ready for
ping terrain.
A smart bit of research from the Labour Party.
Very nice there. Yes, going back to what Preza was asking Heza, and Oliver Dowden's got sort of lightish hair, but it's not quite as magnificent as the Tarzan's mane, it's fair to say. Managing to combine a bit of amusing historical research with the subject, which is still one that Labour is getting some traction with. And then from Dowden, back to the old, let's drag Corbyn into this. Now, look, you and I keep mocking this. They wouldn't keep doing it if they didn't think it had some kind of cut through. Though I have to say it's not one I've picked up recently in a focus group. This idea that, the Labour front bench propped up Corbyn and, he was an inappropriate kind of person to be Prime Minister. I guess it works in some parts of the country, but it feels in the chamber a bit old hat.
What do you think, Sammy, that when Oliver Dowden is doing his, I grew up with a humble background and all that, does that, and actually talking specifically about right to buy, was that a vehicle of social mobility that we're missing now?
No. No, look, it's complicated, as all these things are, but the problem with the right to buy, as I think we all know, is that it depleted the stock of social housing. And so while it might have been a route to actually significant wealth for quite a lot of people who bought at the right time and then saw a rising housing market, it depleted the possibility of mobility for a large chunk of other people that then came after them. So it's the age-old thing when you come to social mobility of the conflict between what it means for an individual to be mobile and what it means for society to enable mobility in general.
He was also quite careful, wasn't he, to not actually mention right to buy. I wonder whether they were right to buy or not, or whether he was just talking more generally. It'd be quite interesting.
Oh, just under Margaret Thatcher,
yes.
They bought a house.
Yes. Now, it may be that if someone has a dig around, they might discover that it wasn't a council house that was bought. That was just my sort of old news reporter cynicism clanging
Surely
away.
not. Now, I've just looked up the quotes from Angela Rayner quoting John Prescott from March 1996, saying, "Why is it in Tory Britain 1,000 families every week have their homes repossessed? 120,000 families are homeless. 1.7 million families are trapped in negative equity. On that miserable record is my right honourable friend, the leader of the opposition, correct in identifying the Conservatives as the party of home wreckers." Which is pretty strong stuff.
Interesting contribution from John Prescott.
Well. Yes, given what we know. If only we'd known then what we know now. His second question says, how can he be so complacent in the face of the sheer misery created by the government's policies? So let's see if Angela Rayner continues that with question number 2.
Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, I think he's taking lessons from the former Prime Minister on telling the facts. The last Labour government worked hard to dramatically reduce the number of children in temporary accommodation. But under the Tories, the number of homeless children has risen by 75%. I'm proud of our record on tackling child poverty. Does the right honourable gentleman feel ashamed of his?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'll tell you what this government has done. We've lifted 400 100,000 children out of child poverty. We have introduced the national living wage, something the party opposite totally failed to do, and increased the national living wage by the largest amount ever, meaning £1,800 for working people, and cutting their taxes by doubling the personal allowance. That is the surest way to ensure we lift people out of poverty, and would never have happened with the party opposite.
National living wage, we should point out, the first thing that really springs to mind there, Tim, national living wage, he says was opposed by Labour because it was in the budgets and they always vote against these things. But the national minimum wage
was a Labour innovation.
Which
the Tories
opposed
by the Conservative Party. So what George Osborne did when he was Chancellor was to say, we're going to raise this by a decent amount to something that you might actually be able to live off, rather than it just being a kind of safety net underneath. So that was one of the kind of the upsides of coming out of austerity, but boosting that considerably. And look, the government, I think, if we're being fair to them, have got an okay record on sort of doing some of this stuff, but a lot of it affects people not quite at the bottom, but at the sort of next level up, because a lot of people didn't benefit from that personal allowance change. They don't pay income tax because they're not earning enough. And I think the argument we're likely to have ahead of the next election is arguing over the people who are really at the bottom end, and that's where Labour will always try to sort of pitch its tent, whereas the Tories have tended to help people who are at the low end of the kind of working population that has an income on the cusp of paying income tax. And it's they're slightly different groups, and they're both can make a reasonable argument about it, but I suspect it goes back a little bit to relative and absolute poverty. There's I think the Labour Party will focus a bit more on the people in absolute poverty, and given the state of people's finances at the moment, that could be productive for them.
And Sammy Wright, bring you in there, Deputy Head Teacher, but like I said, also a member of the Social Mobility Commission. Just explain what we're talking about, this difference between relative and absolute, because essentially relative poverty just means, well, yeah, you might be poor, but so are loads of other people, rather than absolute. Just explain what the difference is when we're talking about that.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the key thing to understand is actually that 9 times out of 10 when we talk about poverty, we're talking about relative poverty, because there is a measure of when you fall into food poverty, which is when you can't afford to actually eat, which is a pretty extreme one. But actually, most measures of poverty are about how far below the median wage or median household wage you are. And the thing about that is that you have to understand that the statistics are very, very tricky on it, because actually when we go through difficult economic times, then actually relative poverty can decrease because wages bunch together more, and the positioning of the median wage changes. So, for example, in the aftermath of the financial crash, there was actually a reduction in figures of relative poverty because more people were actually struggling. Now, on top of that, there is a kind of long-running dispute around the figures of child poverty, particularly. There was a dispute, I remember, around Boris Johnson using a figure of 600,000 kids lifted out of poverty a few years back. And I don't know the figures they're referring to now, but I do know it's very easy to talk about these in wildly contrasting ways. And what I would definitely say, the only concrete thing that we can actually hold on to here is in absolute terms, in literal terms of the amount of money that families get. The government has absolutely contributed to them getting less money by introducing and keeping the two-child cap on child benefits.
Yeah. Sammy, thank you for that. It was really well explained. And actually, when they're both fighting over statistics, it doesn't matter what the statistics show. If people's real life experience is they're struggling, they want to know what's going to be done about it rather than arguing about it.
And politicians love statistics, and I don't think there's anything that turns voters off more quickly than people waving statistics around, to be honest.
Well, the worst thing than that is if he starts reading out an email from someone. a real-life person who's been carefully chosen. Anyway, let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is Deputy PMQs. It's Oliver Dowden answering the questions, because someone's just been in touch. Who's it? James says, listen to PMQs on Matt Chorley, and whoever is standing in for Rishi Sunak sounds exactly like Martin Lewis. I'm hoping to get some cost of living advice, so I'm not holding my breath. Does Oliver Dowden sound like Martin Lewis? We'll find out in a sec. First, this is question 3 from Angela Rayner.
Angela Rayner!
Mr. Speaker, it's like the ghost of Prime Minister past is still here. And I tell the right honourable gentleman that he should be careful about the stats he used, because the Children's Commissioner warned the other Prime Minister about peddling false narrative on child poverty around those figures. The truth is, rising bills and soaring mortgages and plummeting real wages are pushing more and more families to the brink. Those already struggling are being hit hardest by the Tory mortgage bombshell and rising food costs. So can he tell us how many primary school children have been pushed into poverty since his government took power?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I would say to the Right Honourable Lady, it is this party, not the party opposite, which extended free school meals to all 5, 6 and 7-year-olds, something the party opposite failed to do, and it sits alongside many measures we are taking to help people with the cost of living. We are paying half of families' energy bills last winter, funded by our 75% windfall tax, freezing fuel duty, helping families with childcare, and delivering on our pledge to reduce the debt. It may come as a surprise to the Right Honourable Lady, but balancing the books means more than working out how many more millions to take from her union paymasters.
Union paymasters, that was a good one.
Well, we've not had that for a while.
Not had that for a little while.
At least a fortnight.
You can tell he's flare. Given that we're pretty much in the same area we always are with Angela Rayner, housing, cost of living, poverty. These are not unusual themes for her. He seems to be struggling quite a bit. Maybe it's because the figures aren't very good. One Tory mortgage bombshell, one union paymasters. It's interesting, though, to hear Dowden boasting about extending free school meals, which Boris Johnson's government did, having twice been massively beaten up by Marcus Rashford, the footballer, and they tried to retract it and then got beaten up again. And now they're boasting that they're doing it. Was he not boasting extending free school meals to every 5, 6 and 7-year-old? Wasn't that the Nick Clegg policy?
It might have been originally.
I was going to say that,
didn't they extend it during
during
COVID?
Rolled out during some school holidays, but there's been an argument since then about it's now a Labour policy, or Sadiq Khan's doing it in London, doing it during the school holidays. Sammy, you're better.
Sounds like you know what you're talking about, Sammy. Why don't you
as an actual teacher, why don't you come in and tell us what we're talking about?
Yeah. So basically, he's referring. The way he phrased that seems very clear that he's referring to the policy that was championed by the Liberal Democrats and the coalition government of universal free school meals for younger children. The Marcus Rashford thing was about extending free school meals over the holiday period, which now doesn't happen again. That was a temporary thing during COVID. And yes, it's Sadiq Khan is talking about universal free school meals, and I think Labour are contemplating it as a policy. Although obviously it's a bit of an odd one, because in some ways it could be very, very valuable because some students don't take up the entitlement to free school meals, but in other ways it's something where you're actually providing something for free to some kids who don't need it. Yeah. So is it a use of money?
I mean, I certainly know, because we benefited from the Nick Clegg lunch.
And now you're getting a free lunch off me. It's almost the same, isn't it?
It's almost happening there. Yeah. But we could definitely have bought them. It was quite handy that we didn't have to buy a load of those small yogurt pots and all of that while she was in for school. But it certainly didn't feel like something that was absolutely desperate that the government needed to be doing.
No, I mean, as someone who loads a lunchbox with small
those
petit flou yogurts each morning.
Sammy, do you have to go around policing lunchboxes?
No. At secondary school, we let them, bring what they want. What we have to do is police that they have a lunchbox so that they can get into the hall to eat it. Because otherwise, they say they've got a lunch, then sneak in and join the queue. It's all very, all very Machiavellian.
Very good.
But I was going to say, one of the things I have noticed over these questions so far is, as a teacher, I'm often trying to get my staff to improve the quality of their questioning, and there's a lot of professional development we do on this. I'd say the questioning is pretty poor here. I don't think there's any question that's actually been answered, and I think all the ones that have been asked don't actually have an answer in mind. They're all completely
welcome to Prime Minister's
Welcome to our world, Sammy. This is... Right, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we've got 3 to get through in the next 10 minutes, so hopefully they'll be snappier and we'll get through them all. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons. So this is Deputy PMQs. It's Tim Shipman and Sammy Wright, who is currently a Deputy Head, who's joining us to guide us through it all. So it's Deputy PMQs, Oliver Dowden versus, with question 4, this is Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, once again, he talks about balancing the books. His party crashed the economy. And he seems to be completely oblivious to what it's like for working people in this country at the moment. New research out today shows that 400,000 more primary school-aged children are growing up in poverty since his government came to office. Why does he think that is?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I will take absolutely no lectures whatsoever from the party opposite about how we help children in the most need. It is record investment from this government in education, £2 billion more this year, £2 billion next year, which is giving those very children the best possible start in life, ensuring that we have the highest reading standards in the Western world. And I have to say to the Honourable Lady, listen, her leader says he hates tree huggers. They seem very keen on hugging that magic money tree.
Oh dear.
Talk about a sort of tacked on thing that
just turned the page and read out whatever was in front of him. So I can give you some information about those figures, because the Labour Party have been in touch. So they have got hold of some analysis which shows that 1.4 million children aged between 5 and 10 were living in poverty in 2021-22. That's a rise of more than 400,000 since the Tories came into office. That's Labour analysis of DWP statistics of households below average incomes. So that's in relative poverty, that's up 41% between 2010 and 2021.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure those numbers are right. But equally, I think if Dowden said earlier that they've lifted a similar number out of poverty, which presumably includes kids who are older than primary school age and over a longer period of time, or a different period of time.
And I suppose actually, once you start getting into that, the children we're talking about aren't even the same children, are they? That's over that length of time.
They would have grown up.
Yes, they are now literally older. They are now literally older. And you just started talking about reading instead. Sorry, any better those questions and answers?
Well, there's some specifics there which are important to talk about, because they're real. So the reading thing is to do with a system of international comparison called PEARLS, and we were 4th in the world. I can't remember what the other ones were, but I can well believe that we might have been the best of the Western nations on that. And that is a genuine success. It's a tribute to lots of the work that's been done over the last decade on particularly in literacy in primary schools and the use of phonics. What I would say, though, is that there is a distinction between how that's tested and then what outcomes might happen at the end of schooling for kids, because there is often a dip, particularly for disadvantaged students. And more significantly, those stats on educational funding are absolutely horrendous because they are deeply misleading. Because, of course, the point about educational funding is it's funding the number of children. And the number of children has increased massively over this last decade.
Yeah, so if you've got more children, you have to spend more. And actually, I think, am I right in saying the spend per child hasn't gone up nearly as much?
No, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons that unions rejected the teacher pay offer was because the first time we've actually had a proper per child increase in recent years, which still hasn't taken it up to parity of what it was in 2010. We're still below those levels, but that happened in 2022. And then the pay deal that we were offered at Easter, we were told it was fully funded. It wasn't. It was funded using the uplift that they'd just given us.
Yeah. And in fact, That's a debate. I mean, it's in the papers today. That's the debate which is going on right across Whitehall. Is departments being, saying we want to give them the various sectors pay rises, but then being told they've got to find it out of existing budgets, which will have a knock-on effect elsewhere. Listen, we've got to try and get through 2 more questions in the next 4 minutes, so let's see if we can do this. This is question number 5 from Angela Rayner.
Angela Rayner.
I think that's people laughing and enjoying the tree-hugging magic money tree.
Mr. Speaker,
Rachel Reeves,
he
particularly
doesn't even
unimpressed by that.
acknowledge it, let alone explain why child poverty is rising. What hope has he got of solving it? So let me try a simpler question for him. How many kids don't have a permanent address today compared to when Labour left office in 2010?
Deputy Prime Minister.
We can exchange all these numbers across the dispatch box. These, Mr. Speaker.
I mean, just say I don't know and sit down. That would shock her, actually.
Yeah.
These are the numbers that matter.
Oh.
There are 1.7 million fewer people in absolute poverty under this government. 400,000 fewer children, 200,000 fewer pensioners, and 1 million fewer people of working age, because the single best route out of poverty is a job, and record numbers of people, 4 million more people under this government have got a job. That is the difference between this party and the party opposite, who always leave office with unemployment higher.
Angela.
I think the reason that those are the figures that matter is those are the ones he had in his folder,
They
thinking
did, yes.
that having found them based
After
on the
a
previous
lengthy
questions. Yeah, you're right. So he's now he says that 400,000 have been lifted out of absolute poverty.
Yes.
She's saying 400,000 have been.
Something?
Yes, Sammy, go on. Yeah,
Because I think I've figured out what he's talking about here. Because so I believe, I'm not certain of this, but I believe that the measure of absolute poverty is one that is set from, it's a little bit like council tax. There was like a benchmark that was set, I think, in 2008. So I would suggest that. I don't, please don't quote me on exactly how it works, but I suspect that the reason that those figures have changed so much, when at the same time relative poverty seems to have increased so much, is probably to do with inflation.
excellent. Well, let's go back there. This is
next.
Question number 6. As part of Oliver Dowden playing the game, answering the last question with some figures I've just found in my folder.
Like a Two Ronnies sketch,
but not funny. I assume now we're going to get Angela Rayner answering the question of how many children do not have an address now compared to when Labour left government. Let's go to the House of Commons. This is Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, what matters is what people feel every single day at the moment, who are going to work and can't afford their mortgage, can't afford their rent and can't afford their bills because of this Conservative government. There are 55,000 more children without a permanent address today compared to when they took office 13 years ago. We've gone from a Labour cabinet focused on tackling child poverty to Tory ministers who won't even admit the problem. Just like the question time in March 1996, they can only offer excuses and not answers. Lord John Prescott said to Lord Michael Heseltine that day, "How can the right honourable gentleman be so complacent in the face of sheer misery created by his government's policies? 27 years on, why are we asking the exact same thing?"
A little bit more if we carry on. Come on, Deputy Prime.
Mr. Speaker,
Oliver Dowden doesn't look
I
very
know
happy.
there's a reshuffle coming up on the other side, but this audition for John Prescott's old job is just getting a little bit hackneyed. It is this government that has lifted 400,000 children out of poverty. The party opposite, I hear the right lady, claiming to be the party of working people, but under their policies, people can't even get to work. They support Just Stop Oil protesters blocking our roads. They support their union paymasters stopping our trains. And of course, they support the hated ULEZ stopping cars across our capital. While Conservatives get Britain moving, Labour are standing in everyone's way.
Wow.
Well, look, calling Rayner's performance hackneyed is really a pot kettle scenario from Dowden.
Right, so the first thing we should say is, as a political strategy, this was much better from Angela Rayner than last week.
Correct.
Drawing comparisons, like literally saying it's like 1996 all over again.
Yep.
You're tired, you've broken Britain, Labour's on its march, I'm John Prescott.
Discipline on...
We've had enough wooden drivel. That's a smart bit of positioning by her.
Yeah, and the only sensible thing that Dowden did in response throughout 6 questions was to bang on about ULEZ, which apparently is cutting through a bit in the Uxbridge by-election, which they would then intend to. This is the £12.50 a day charge for polluting vehicles in London, which means they may only lose the Uxbridge by-election by
a little bit,
a decent amount instead of a catastrophic landslide. But yeah, I mean, it just look, big picture, I think. Rayner is there to score kind of points and put a bit of stick about. I didn't think she was particularly good today, but she won it.
She was bad,
a healthy 6-0, and that is by some distance Oliver Dowden's worst performance since he took on the job, I would say.
Yeah, certainly people who seem to agree on the YouTube channel. Dowden down and out. Look at Penny Morton's face. Yeah, she didn't look like she was enjoying it. Can we please have an acknowledgement of how absolutely dire Dowden has been this week? Dowden is pathetic. And on and on and on. Sammy, before we let you go, what did you make of that?
I thought, I would agree with what you've said in terms of the relative performance, but I thought the whole thing was a fairly sad indictment of our political process, because I'm not sure what the point of any of it was. Could we not just get them to do like a 2-minute advert each and put it on the telly? They're not talking to each other.
It's a very good way of summing it up, Sammy. Sammy, lovely to speak to you. Now, I've been calling you deputy head for the purpose of this all day, but you're about to become the head, aren't you?
Yeah, well, head of school. So there's we have an exec head and CEO above me. But I'm really pleased with that.
Well, congratulations, Sammy. I'm not saying it's just a result of your performance in the last half an hour, but we appreciate it. Really
Reshuffle.
Sammy, really good to speak to you. Thanks so much. That's Sammy Wright joining us, like I said, deputy head of Southmoor Academy and former member of the Social Mobility Commission, and he's an author as well. He's a busy man. Right, stay where you are. We'll do Best of the Rest next. Lara Spirit will be here with that after we get the news from Rachel Jewell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. Jeremy Vine says the BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager thousands of pounds for explicit images needs to come forward. Fresh allegations have now emerged about the unnamed broadcaster. The Sun's reporting the star broke lockdown rules with another person in 2021, and a different individual claims they were sent messages on social media when they were 17. Speaking on his Channel 5 show, Jeremy Vine says he knows the presenter involved.
I am very worried about his state of mind and what this is doing to him. I haven't spoken to him, but I gather from somebody who has that he is described as angry and keen to play it long.
Nearly 1 million mortgage holders will see their monthly repayments jump by £500 or more in the coming years. That calculation's in the latest research on the financial sector from the Bank of England. Members of the NAS UWT in state-funded schools in England have voted in favour of industrial action over pay. The union's planning for it to be continuous but just short of strikes, although it will consider walkout dates in the autumn term. And Nadine Dorries is getting £20,000 as a partial advance for a book about the downfall of her old boss. It's called The Plot, The Political Assassination of Boris Johnson, and is out in September. A mixture of sunshine and showers this afternoon. Showers could turn locally heavy and thundery, rather breezy too in the south. Nick Ellaby has the sports.
The head coach of Zambia's women's football team, Bruce Mwape, has refused to answer questions about sexual misconduct allegations as his team arrived in New Zealand for the World Cup. The Guardian recently published an interview with an unnamed player who claimed it was normal for him to sleep with players. Football's world governing body FIFA and Zambian police are investigating, and Mwape was asked by TVNZ reporters about the allegations.
What's this concern all about?
The allegations made by The Guardian?
comment. No comment.
Meanwhile, with the tournament just over a week away, US forward Alex Morgan says this edition, expanded to 32 teams, will be the best one yet. And her 38-year-old teammate Megan Rapinoe says announcing her retirement before playing in her 4th World Cup lets her relax a bit.
I think it allows me to focus a lot more. I think it allows the team to focus, a lot more. We don't have to get questions every time, every single game. So I think it's just kind of out there, and now I can just really enjoy it and focus on trying to win the tournament.
Good news for Republic of Ireland fans. Captain Katie McCabe is back in training. She's had an ankle injury. Every England and Republic of Ireland game will be live with our colleagues on TalkSport. To rugby union, where England's women will host Canada in a 2-test series this September. Exeter's Sandy Park will host the first match on the 23rd before a second a week later at a venue yet to be confirmed. England beat Canada in the semi-finals of last year's World Cup, which brought up a 30th straight victory. And organisers of the Open Golf have confirmed the champion will receive a record £2.3 million in prize money this year. The total pot for Royal Liverpool stands at £12.7 million. That's an 18% increase on last year. The R&A says it wants to make sure the major remains at the pinnacle of the sport, despite increases in prize money across the game. The Open starts a week tomorrow. There's more on these stories on the Times website and app.
This is Times Radio.
This summer, let your imagination run wild at Disney's The Lion King. Exploding with glorious colours, stunning effects and enchanting music. Watch in awe as the majesty of the Serengeti comes to life all around you, right in the heart of London's West End. Discover more at thelionking.co.uk.
Does great tasting food have to cost more? At Asda, we're pitting ourselves against luxury shops in blind taste tests, and the results might surprise you. Like Asda's extra special gourmet burgers made from Aberdeen Angus beef and British chuck steak. 80% of people said they were tastier than Harrods fillet steak burgers. Yes, the Harrods. Asda. That's more like it. Selected stores, subject to availability. Independent tests on 106 people, May 2023. For verification, asda.com/Food Revolution.
Download the Free Times Radio app and listen to us wherever you are. Across the UK, on DAB Digital Radio, on the Free Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Very good afternoon. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio. We've done PMQs Unpacked with Oliver Dowden and Angela Rayner. Most of you seem to think on the YouTube channel that, in fact, Angela Rayner won that. And lots of you have been sending me Angela Rayner anagrams, which are not broadcastable, so we won't be doing those. Lara Spirit has been watching the best of the rest of Deputy PMQs Unpacked. How was it overall?
It was good.
Was it?
Yeah.
Better?
Well, you're never going to know because I'm under orders to say it was good now every time I come in, but it was good.
It can't have been worse than the main event.
Well, I thought it was better today than last week.
Sorry.
Wasn't it? It was better than last week.
I think it was better because it was so much worse, though.
Somebody's mic's been in touch. I'm missing Dominic Raab, and that's a phrase I never expected to say this morning. Wink, wink.
What we needed was a wink, wasn't
it?
I mean, there's a message here from a senior political operative, I won't say from which, it was effing awful, utterly, utterly dire, bad jokes, badly delivered, not even so bad that it actually makes you smile type. Just, and then another expletive.
Wow.
And that's someone who kind of, likes this kind of thing.
Likes this kind of thing. Unlike Sammy the teacher, who's a bit like, I've not watched this before, I'm not watching this again. So then, come on then, Lara, let's get stuck into it. What made it so good?
So we've got Murray Black.
Yay!
First. None of the sizzlers that we saw last week. Do you remember? No, but I think actually interesting for just how unapologetic Oliver Dowden was on the mortgage question, and that he unprompted brought up the question of restraint on public sector pay, which I think will make some people squirm. So take a listen to this.
Oh, good.
Bank of England predict that mortgage payments will rise by at least £500 for 1 million households. The Prime Minister says that people need to hold their nerve. The Chancellor said just last night that mortgage holders should just shop around. Speaking of his own party, the member for South West Devon said, if the circus doesn't stop by Christmas, it's over. Does the Deputy Prime Minister understand that people can't afford to wait until Christmas and that they need help right now?
Yeah. Deputy Prime Minister.
Oh, yeah, let's hear
Mr.
the
Speaker,
answer.
the fundamental thing we have to do is to halve inflation. That is an approach that the IMF, quote, strongly endorses because higher inflation drives higher mortgage rates. But that's not all we are doing. With the mortgage charter, signed up by 90% of mortgage providers, we are giving people help to extend their terms, to go interest only, and to reduce their monthly payments. Now, that action is supported by Martin Lewis, a real money-saving expert, unlike the big spenders on those benches.
Oh, well, there we are. Particularly when somebody said earlier on that he sounded like Martin Lewis.
Indeed. Interesting that it's left to the SNP to raise the subject about wages. Would have been once natural terrain for Labour, but quite interesting that Rayner didn't feel able to do that, and that's partly because the first question that she'd get asked was, well, what are you going to do? How much are you going to pay up? And as we know, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is sitting on her colleagues, metaphorically saying, don't you dare spend any money without my say-so, and they've got to try and to win the election, they need to look like they're not just going to splurge the cash. So, left to the SNP, who don't have those problems, to bring it up.
What else have you got, Lara?
This is a slightly challenging question from Bima Falami, Conservative MP, about home ownership and specifically the opportunities for young people to get on the housing ladder. It looks a little bit like Ian Duncan Smith is falling asleep behind him at the time, but I actually think he might just be looking down.
Well, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, this is
why
what you're
you
here
get
for.
Premium.
Premium.
So viewers can make up their own mind as to that. But the question is also worth listening to, so let's take a listen to this.
Let's take a look. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. On these benches, we know, as the party of aspiration, the importance of home ownership. According to a recent estimate by Barclays Bank, it now takes an average of 8 years for the average first-time buyer to save for a deposit. And in parts of London and the South East, it can be longer than that. What is the Deputy Prime Minister and the government doing in order to improve the prospects for younger people who want to own their own homes?
Prime Minister.
Well, I know what a passionate champion of this issue my honourable friend is. It is actually the case that almost 850,000 households have been helped purchase a home since 2010. And actually in 2021, the number of people getting onto the property ladder for the first time was at a 20-year high, thanks to initiatives such as First Homes and the Help to Buy scheme. Of course, that stands in contrast to the party opposite, who oversaw the lowest level of house building since the 1920s.
Well, I'm going to say that at the very least, he was very relaxed, Ian Duncan Smith, there.
No, he was nodding. I've done that myself in various situations. You could see it's fine. He was looking down to start with. Then his head starts to go, and that's the sign that, and then he catches it, and then he does a whole range of things to try and make it look like he wasn't going to sleep. So he first looks at his watch, then he props up his face with his hands, hoping that will stop his head from slipping forward. This is like the total Shipman act when I've been caught dozing off. I got caught dozing at my desk not that long ago.
Here?
Yeah, the head of news wandered over and said to one of my colleagues, "Shall we talk very loudly next to him?"
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, you've got young children.
I have
Tim.
got young children, and
you're a modern man.
Anyway,
looking after
I feel for Ian Duncan Smith there because he knew he was on camera as well. He knew it.
But Bim sitting in front of him.
But the key is that bit where the head just goes, and then
it's the
and
jump
then it's like, oh yes, no, I was just looking down at my watch.
And then you have to do all those things. He was sort of doing that, rubbing his chin.
Rubbing the chin.
If you pull on your ears, does that
pinching yourself, all
putting
of that.
on your ears.
What do you do?
If you pull on your ears, these are my ears. If you pull on your
ears,
ears,
they're rather more
it's sort of
magnificent than our ears.
I think it stops.
They are great ears.
No, it stops you nodding off.
Pulling on your ears stops you going to sleep.
Pulling on your earlobes.
I bet you got some grief with those when you were little, didn't you?
Well, maybe that's why they're so big, because I was often nodding off in biology lessons.
Seems fitting.
Anything else?
I mean, we've got Ed Davey if we have time for him.
Wow. Have we got time for Ed Davey?
Once a month special.
What do you think, YouTubers? Yeah, go on then. Is he any good?
Well, it mentions Somerset, where, of course, we have the by-election next week, and you'll hear the opposite benches groan.
If you've got Ed Davey talking about Somerset, hold on to your ears, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In January, Emily booked an appointment with her local dentist in Chard, Somerset,
I've been there.
for the 14th of June, only to be told by a neighbour at the end of May that the surgery had closed in April. Emily no longer has a dentist. All the remaining surgeries aren't taking on any new patients. Emily doesn't know what to do. So can the Deputy Prime Minister tell Emily and millions of people like her when can they get an appointment with a local NHS dentist?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman may have missed, but our NHS workforce plan is investing an extra £2.4 billion into training and retaining crucial NHS staff, including dentists and GPs. And actually, the number of dentists will rise by 40%. And I would say to people across that constituency that the best way they can ensure better services for their NHS is to vote for Faye Purbrick, the Conservative candidate.
There we are. So obviously referring to that by-election.
Is there not a minor scandal here?
Go on.
Ed Davies' wife's called Emily.
Do you think she's been?
I think he's just had his ear bent over breakfast, and he's decided to raise it at PMQs.
But should she be trying to register for a dentist in Somerton and Froome in that case?
No, perhaps not. Just trying to stir up some interest.
But there's an interesting thing here, Lara, because I remember when the Lib Dems won the Tiverton and Honiton by-election, the thing they really banged on about there was GP surgery access, getting a GP appointment. And which at that point wasn't really in the national ether. And it really, both sides, Tories and Lib Dems, said it really played a part in the Lib Dems ultimately winning that one. So maybe there is, slightly laugh about trying to get a dentist in charge. But if everyone in charge is trying to get a dentist, maybe it's hammering home.
I've heard this from Southern Tories, that this is becoming one of the things they're getting hammered on the doorstep for in those Lib Dem facing seats in the South. It was a former cabinet minister who's in a marginal who brought this up to me several months ago and said, if we don't sort out dentists, it's going to turn into one of those weird Facebook campaigns that no one notices nationally that absolutely murders
like animal salience or whatever.
Absolutely murders you locally.
I think Oliver Dowden's response, it's my least favourite kind of semi-incredulous retort of his, that idea of someone might have missed this. I think he's missed this major announcement. Like, he's missed the workforce plan. So actually, I think he said that maybe 3 times today.
Yeah.
You basically just missed this if you hadn't seen the workforce plan.
We aren't doing all this stuff.
Actually, everyone can
not
get a
take
dentist appointment
lectures
because we've
from
got a
someone
workforce
about
plan.
it. That's his other one.
Well, given that, we should point out, because Ed Davey, who did he mention? He mentioned the Conservative candidate, Faye Purbrick, is the Conservative candidate. So, in the interest of fairness, we have to mention all of the others. Lorna Cork is the candidate for the Christian People's Alliance. Martin Dimmery is from the Green Party. Sarah Dyke standing for the Liberal Democrats. Bruce Evans from Reform UK. Neil Guild for the Labour Party. Rosie Mitchell is independent. Faye Purbrick is Conservative Party. And Peter Richardson from UKIP.
It's a bit of a shame there's no Lord Buckethead, isn't it?
Well, there's too many of them around, aren't there? Because there's too many by-elections happening. So there's only so many monster-waving loonies that could be available.
I thought you could probably
Lara,
find
lovely
one
to
or
see you.
two.
Thank you for bringing us Ian Duncan-Smith falling asleep and Ed Davey talking about Chard.
Thank you.
2 of my favourite things. I was off to pull on her own ears. What time will your email be out?
3 p.m.
3 p.m. Very good. Tim Shipman and I are off for lunch. You may remember a few weeks ago, Tim Shipman bet me lunch/dinner that Boris Johnson would be mentioned by Keir Starmer at PMQs. He wasn't, so we're off for lunch later, which you're going to miss. But don't worry, because you'll be able to hear it over the summer, because everything's content. So we're going to talk and eat and then record it. Lovely. Up next, we're going to talk about Brexit. So that's something to look forward to. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
Mariella Frostrup on Times Radio.
Activist, agitator and founder and leader of the political True and Fair Party, Gina Miller, joins me from 2 p.m. We're also on the ground in Germany to hear why the country is crying out for millions of immigrants. And we ask what happens when gentrification guts a city and drives all the artists out. I'm talking about London. Oh yeah. All that, plus the latest news, views and analysis.
Mariella Frostrup, this afternoon from 1 on Times Radio.
Listen to Times Radio on your DAB digital radio.
My name's Nick and I'm a 78-year-old voice actor. You may be asking yourself, shouldn't you be retired? Maybe. But truthfully, I love what I do and don't intend on stopping now. You see, people today are living longer in the UK, which means we need to